Hello everyone, this is the last video of approaches, right? It's all coming to an end finally. I am going to be going through comparison of approaches today. Um, uh, an increasingly important bullet point, basically. AQA are kind of cottoning on to students not being able to compare that well. So, Bella, sorry, Bella's playing with a COVID stick. Bella. No, all right. Rude. Come up here. Come up here. Wait, don't you run. Say hello. Say hello. No? All right. Out of order. Anyway. Yeah, sorry about that. So, comparing approaches. You need to... Oh, my God. Stop throwing the bin over. You need to know the 5 approaches very well for this, right? You need to know and be able to compare all of them. The key bit to this, and I cannot emphasize this enough, you need to know the approaches very well, right? You should not have to revise this in the slightest. So you may be asked to give similarities or differences for any of the 5 approaches, and they are not going to tell you until the exam. There's no way teachers can prepare you for every single question. You're looking at potentially 25 different questions here, or roughly speaking, maybe 20 questions. So there are no slides for this because they are being remade. So what I want to do is I want to get you thinking about what you could compare them on. So what I've done here is I've done a bit of a prep sheet. These are things that you want to consider comparing the approaches on. Now, you can't get the biological approach and the cognitive approach and just go, I compare them. You have to compare them on one particular thing, right? You can't compare these big, massive approaches on like what they are in general. You have to compare them on one thing. So here are some examples that I would want you to go for. So for example, is it free will or determinist? Now it may be in the middle and therefore you're not going to be able to use it. Are they holistic? Are they reductionist? Is it an alpha biased approach, or is it a beta biased approach? Are they scientific? Are they not scientific? Do they have scientificity? Do they have practical applications? Now that's an easy similarity. That's an easy similarity because why would I not teach you? Why would I not teach you an approach? Why would I teach you an approach if it was useless? Why would I teach you an approach that can't help society? What is the point of that? So, a basic similarity is that all of the approaches have practical applications. That's a really easy one to go for. Are they nature? Are they nurture? Do they have research support? There's, by the way, this is not an exhaustive list. There's many, many, many more points you could go for. Do they tend to use animals? Right? Do they tend to use animals? Do they abide by comparative psychology? So comparative psychology is all to do with like the use of animals, for example, and whether or not you can actually compare them to humans. So there's quite a lot. Now, what I would say here, I want to just briefly show you potential questions, well, not potential, but actual questions that have come up before. Now, these are actual questions. I believe they are getting harder to answer these questions. So if we just give it a while to load, because we are now at about 76 pages or 80 pages, they could ask you any of the 5 approaches. Right, you're going to take me quite a while. I should have done this. Oh, I've already gone past you silly, silly goose. Here we go. So there's only 3 questions that have come up in the comparison of the questions, but AQA are asking more comparison questions. So if I just zoom in here, what have we got? We've got, so for example, this one just here. Outline the psychodynamic approach. Now, I want you to pay attention to the format of this. So I'll ask you to outline the psychodynamic approach. That's easy, right? For 3 marks here, because it is an 8 marker. you're looking at talking about 4 things to do with psychodynamic approach: levels of consciousness, the structure of the psyche, defense mechanisms, and psychosexual stages. Right? Easy. Fine. Talk about all of those. And then what it asks you is to discuss one or more differences, so not similarities, discuss one or more differences between the psychodynamic approach and the humanistic approach. So discuss one or more differences. So a difference that springs to mind is, actually a difference is, I'd say the degree to which they are socially sensitive off the top of my head. Psychodynamic is very socially sensitive because we're essentially having sexual thoughts, or, maybe not sexual thoughts, but libidinal thoughts about our opposite sex parent. That's quite socially sensitive. We don't really want to think of our parent in that way, and yet we're being told that we've did it for years as a kid. Whereas humanism is not particularly socially sensitive, beyond the fact that it says that hardly anybody is going to actually reach self-actualization. So that is one question 8 marker. They do get harder. This one just here, outline, and have a look again. It usually starts with an outline. Outline the behaviourist approach, but this time is 16 marks. So you have to talk about 8 ticks worth of behaviorism, operant conditioning, classical conditioning, and then they say compare the behaviorist approach with the biological approach. And in this case, you were looking for, I would say, 3. Some teachers would say 4, some teachers would say 5, but I personally would say 3 detailed comparison points, and I'm going to go through how to write a comparison point in a second. But then I think those points are easy. I think those questions are easy, but just have a look at this one just here. This one ignores the AO1. Even though there is AO1 in there, all it says, it just jumps in. It doesn't have any of this outline nonsense. It just says, compare humanism with psychodynamic. For that one, you literally just do what the question asks. I think a lot of students would end up writing a AO1 that would get absolutely no marks whatsoever. So I think what you would need to do here is you would need to do comparison 1, comparison 2, comparison 3, and no AO1 whatsoever. Why? I hear you asking through your screens, through your heads, does it have AO1 here? I think they are counting the evidence that you do in your 3 comparisons as the AO1. Okay, so I have done a model difference and a model similarity. Before I go into this, the beauty about the approaches, by the way, the beauty about the approaches is that you can bring in anything from the spec to back your point up. And I'm just going to compare a similarity between the biological and the cognitive. And as you can see, the structure is slightly different here. The structure is slightly different. It's not peel, it's pickle, right? It's different, basically. So I'm going to go through a point. I do want you paying attention as I go through this, because I know these videos can be quite boring at this point. But I've got a point here. Fine. Right, short, sharp, to the point. The biological and the cognitive approaches refer to both things you are comparing in the first sentence. It's so irritating when students go, "Oh, difference is that the biological is, scientific." And what is what, right? So the biological and cognitive approaches. Don't know why I'm getting angry about this. I think I've got some issues with this I need to resolve. The biological and cognitive approaches can be considered similar in the way they both have strong practical applications and have contributed to our society. Boom. Then what you have to do is give evidence for 1 and give evidence for 2. But you have to use comparative language. Similarly, right? Use comparative language. For example, the biological approach has contributed through the treatment of mental health in the form of drug therapies. That is not enough detail, so I'm going to need to give a detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my knowledge about schizophrenia in and dump it in here, even though schizophrenia has actually nothing to do with the question. The dopamine hypothesis, and you may not know this yet, that's fine. You will know this in the second year, but the dopamine hypothesis of schizophrenia led to the development of typical typical and atypical antipsychotics which directly impact the quality of life of sufferers. And similarly, the cognitive approach has also significantly contributed to the treatment of mental health disorders. That's not enough, so I'm going to bring in what I know in this case about behaviorism and cognitive and CBT through collaboration with behaviorism, which that is how you spell it. Thank you, America. Cognitive behavioral therapy has been hugely successful in tackling a wide range of physical and mental disorders like depression, anxiety, and even IBS. And then you need the link back. You need the effing link back, right? You need the link back. Otherwise, you're not tying it up and the examiner's going to say, so what? Therefore, both of these approaches have been useful in improving the lives of people and show psychology can be a force for good. Now, you do not have to revise this point. In the exam, I'm hopeful that all of my students and all of the students in the world can think of these points off the top of their head. I literally did not have to open a textbook. I did not have to look at any slides to write these points. I could think of it off the top of my head, and you should as a second year. Now, I do have a difference, only this time the difference is between humanism and biological in this point. And what have I gone for? Roughly same sort of detail. One difference between the biological and humanistic approaches is how reductionist and holistic they are. I could have written that point a little bit better, but I'm tired, so shoot the police. Don't shoot the police. I don't know what that expression is, but don't shoot the police. On the one hand, and look, that's. I don't mean to blow my own trumpet here, but use this sort of terminology, right? On the one hand, on the other hand, opposingly, furthermore, contrastingly. On the one hand, the biological approach typically uses reductionist theories whereby it claims behavior is caused by one single variable. And an example of this is the onset of OCD being caused by a malfunctioning caudate nucleus. That's a really reductionist idea, taking this whole concept of, let's say, OCD and narrowing it down to a really parochial and narrow-minded view that one thing is causing your behavior, right? You're not a frigging plant. You are not that simple, right? So reductionism is not particularly good, or it's more scientific, whatever. Opposingly, humanism tends to take a far more multifaceted, multi-parted, multi-leveled view on human behavior, stating that behavior is the result of several levels of explanation. If you're going to be, and maybe you don't know this yet because you haven't done debates, but if you're going to be talking about reductionism and you don't refer to that term, levels of explanation, you're not doing it right. This is especially true of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm bringing something in from the spec, like from my knowledge to back, and you could pick anything as long as it backs up your point. Maslow claims that self-actualization cannot be achieved through a single variable, but instead is achieved through congruence, achievement, physiological factors, safety factors, for example. Therefore, these approaches vary in their scientificity through how reductionist they are. The more reductionist, the more scientific. That is how you write a difference and a similarity. Point, comparison 1, comparison 2, both with pretty good evidence, and then linking back. My advice would be, personally, to look at this sheet here, definitely, and have a crack at those questions, right? I will put them there. So if you can't bother to find the screen, you can pause the video, write them down. But I would have a crack at those questions and see if you can come up with evaluations off the top of your head. Don't time it, no point, unless you really want to challenge yourself. But maybe answer those questions, have a crack at them using that structure that I've gone through today. Hope that was useful. That's comparisons, and that is now approaches done. So cool, isn't it? Well done.